1st, 1955, about 6 o'clock in the afternoon. I boarded the bus downtown in Montgomery on Coates Square. As the bus proceeded out of town, on the third stop, the white passengers had filled the front of the bus. When I got on the bus, the rear was filled with colored passengers, and they were beginning to stand. The seat I occupied was the first of the seats where the Negro passengers take as they on this route. The driver noted that the front of the bus was filled with white passengers, and there would be 2 or 3 men standing. He looked back and asked that the seat where I had taken, along with 3 other persons, one in the seat with me and 2 across the aisle, was seated. He demanded the seat that we were occupying. The other passengers very reluctantly gave up their seats, but I refused to do so. He then called the officers of the law. They came and placed me under arrest, and I was bailed out shortly after the arrest. And the trial was held December 5th on the next Monday, and the protest began from that day, and it is still continuing.
Well, Mrs. Parks, what in the world ever made you decide to be the person who, after all these years of Jim Crow and segregation, what made you at that particular moment decide you were going to keep that seat?
I felt that I was not being treated right, and that I had a right to retain the seat that I had taken as a passenger on the bus.
But Mrs. Parks, you had been mistreated for many, many, many years. You've lived most of your life in Montgomery, Alabama. What made you decide at the first part of the month of December 1955 that you had had enough?
The time had just come when I had been pushed as far as I could stand to be pushed, I suppose.
Well, Mrs. Parks, had you planned this?
No, I hadn't.
It just happened.
Yes, it did.
Well, had there been many times before in your life when you thought that maybe you were going to do just that kind of thing?
I hadn't thought that I would be the person to do this. It hadn't occurred to me.
But don't you suppose you and many others also thought one time or another you were going to do this thing sooner or later?
Well, we didn't know just what to expect. In our area, we always try to avoid trouble and be as careful as possible to stay out of trouble and along this line. I want to make very certain that it is understood that I had not taken a seat in the white section, as has been reported in many cases. The seat where I occupied, we were in the custom of taking this seat on the way home, even though at times on this same bus route we occupied the same seat with white standing if their space had been taken up, the seats had been taken up. And I was very much surprised that the driver at this point demanded that I remove myself from the seat. At this point demanded that I remove myself from the seat.
You have done something here that I didn't quite understand myself, namely this. You said that you did not take a seat in the white section, and that is, there's no doubt that has been reported in that way. What happened then, that you were in what is normally a colored section, and because whites had to stand up at this point, the driver asked you to get up to allow someone else to sit down.
Yes, white persons.
A white person to sit down.
Yes.
A person who may or may not have been as tired as you.
Well, that's true.
But who had not paid any more than you had.
No, he